Parents, what did your child do that made you look at them completely different? The day my son turned 16, he suddenly took on 2 jobs and started working over 60 hours per week. Given that up to this point, he usually just lounged around all day, this was pretty alarming. I asked him what he was up to all the time, but he'd just shrug and say he was 16 now, so it was time to be a man. The fact he was clearly lying bothered me a lot, but I decided not to push too hard. I figured maybe he just wanted a car or something. But then came my routine checkup at the doctor's office. As I was finishing up, a nurse who knew my son asked quietly if she could speak to me. She proceeded to ask how the treatments were affecting my son's best friend, Jacob. I gave her a blank stare, and I think she realized I had no clue what she was talking about. Your son is a hero, she went on to tell me. For the past few months, he has been helping pay Jacob's medical bills. I don't know if you know this, but Jacob has cancer. Everything stopped for a moment. My head started spinning. I awkwardly thanked her for telling me before leaving the hospital and going straight home. Later that night, when my son finally got back from his 12-hour shift, I watched him closely. He looked like he could barely stand. He was that exhausted. My heart hurt, but I decided not to say anything. Instead, I did something I hadn't done before. I started digging around quietly, asking questions to nurses at the hospital who knew about the situation. What I found broke me. Jacob was going through absolute hell at home. His parents were down financially, and whatever money they had was apparently spent on booze. It turns out my son wasn't just helping pay the bills, he was covering them all. The following night, I followed my son discreetly. I parked across from the fast food place he worked at and just watched. I saw customers yell at him, throw food at him, and even saw a manager berate him. My son usually had a temper, so I was worried he'd freak out and do something he'd regret, but instead, he took it all the abuse calmly, quietly pushing forward, cleaning tables, preparing food, and never complaining, almost as if he knew there was a bigger goal. And after his shift ended, he didn't come straight home. Instead, he went directly to Jacob's house with a bag of food, where he proceeded to stay for a few hours before heading home. I waited until the next day to finally approach him. I wasted no time and immediately told him I knew. And then something amazing happened. The second I asked, it's like the dam exploded. Everything spilled out of Jacob. It looked like a cathartic release. He went on this 30-minute long tirade about Jacob, about his family, about how much he hates his managers, and about how he has to now bump his hours up to 80 per week to make payments ever since the hospital started charging more. Tears were streaming down his face by the end. This was the first time I'd seen him cry since he was 10, and it hit me hard. All I could do was hug him. I felt pride, guilt, sadness, and awe all at once. And so, after a sleepless night, I decided I couldn't just let him carry it alone anymore. Without telling my son, I started taking on extra shifts and working overtime every week. Every penny from the overtime went directly to Jacob's treatments. It wasn't flashy, and I never mentioned it at home. My son had no idea. But when Jacob rang that remission bell a year later, I was there, watching him. Jacob became like a second son to me, and just a few weeks ago, I watched them graduate from college. It was the proudest day of my life.